So hi, my name is Troy. I wear a lot of hats at ARARA. I am our new treasurer and a board member. I also manage the website and the membership chair. So if you have any questions about how to log into the event or get a registration to the event, I'm the person that you need to talk to. And if you respond to any emails, it'll come to me. ARARA is a national organization. We're interested in rock art preservation, study, and education. And our membership consists of professional archaeologists and anthropologists, academics, researchers, documenters, and people like me who have no professional background but are simply interested in this unique cultural resource. The bulk of our membership is in the Western United States, but we have members in 35 different states and 9 countries outside of the United States. Tonight's presentation is by Jim Kaiser and deals with rock art in northern Montana. Ironically, we had intended to hold our annual conference in Montana this spring, and hopefully we will get there next year. So for many of you, this may be a preview of some of the rock art you will see at our next conference. Jim Kaiser was born in Montana. He has a PhD in anthropology and has retired from serving the U.S. Forest Service. He has more than 150 archaeology publications, most of which concern rock art. So I think Jim has written more publications than I've actually read. One of my early experiences with Jim was on a field trip that I led for ARARA when we held our conference in the small town of Bluff in southern Utah. I met my group at a wonderful rock art site that included panels of Ute, Fremont, and Barrier Canyon style rock art. I started the group with the Ute panel because it was the panel in which I was the least interested. But to my surprise, Jim didn't want to leave. He was fascinated by the horse, shield, and warrior figures. I realized that day that I had a lot to learn about this period and style of rock art. I expect that tonight we will hear a lot more about horses, shields, and warriors. And with that, I turn the time over to Jim.
Okay, Troy, thank you. So what I do now is I go share screen. I click this and hit slideshow from the beginning. And I believe we're started. I want to thank, first of all, Peter, Troy, ARARA, and David Kaiser for getting me involved in this and helping me through it, giving me tutorials and whatnot. We're off to the races. Okay, so in 2013, a long time ago now, it didn't seem that long ago, a few years ago, but in 2013, I received an email from a fellow named Tom McCormick. Tom's a Montana rancher, and what he asked me to do was verify a petroglyph he had on his ranch. That's the petroglyph in the left side of your screen there. I identified the petroglyph as a Blackfoot style horse, and over the next 6 months, I talked to Tommy and gained his trust so that he finally told me where he lived. Montana ranchers are a little skeptical of folks coming out on their ranches, or many of them are. And so it took me a few months of just talking back and forth to Tom, but finally we gained each other's trust. He told me where he lived, and he invited me to come and see his ranch and see the site in the summer of 2014. Well, when I found out where he lived on Cut Bank Creek, just south of Cut Bank, Montana, I was both surprised and eager to visit. Because Tom, that area where Tom lived, he's since moved across the mountains to western Montana, but when he lived on his original ranch, that area didn't have very many rock art sites recorded. You're looking here at Montana. This database, this distribution of sites is taken from John and Mavis Greer's article about 2000, which is sort of the best we've got still. But you see those 4 counties up there where the arrow is. Tommy lived right at the point of that arrow, essentially. In the SHPO database at the time, those 4 counties, Glacier, Toole, Pend Oreille, and Liberty, had 7 known rock art sites. And yet, just to the north of them, just barely to the north of them, you had you had writing on stone where you've got 150, more than 150 sites. And to the south, you can see the counties in red have quite a number of sites. So that I sort of called that the donut hole, a place where there weren't very many known sites. And yet, when I visited Tom's ranch, he showed me this great site here. There's the horse at the red arrow. That was the original one he showed me. I visited his ranch. I recorded this site, traced it, but I was equally pleased to see that the area where he lived, which I had never visited that particular little small area before. I'd been on the main highways all around it, but never been down to Sullivan Bridge and the Marias, where the Marias River starts and all that sort of stuff. I was really excited because there's really a high potential for finding more sites in the area. I'd always thought that the Kievan Rim, which stretches from Cutbank to the Canadian border and parallels I-15 from Shelby to the Canadian border. When I worked at Writing on Stone there in 1976, I always felt that the Kievan Rim had to have sites on it. And I also knew there were other sandstone rim rocks in that area. But when I saw the Cut Bank area, it was just, the Cut Bank Creek area, it was just, wow, this is a great area. I'd never had the opportunity to investigate. So I bugged Tommy at the time. I said, look for more of these things. This is what the area looks like, just so you get a feel of the environment. You got these nice sandstone cliffs. They tend to be blocky. They're not like at Writing on Stone, except that one in the lower left. But at Writing on Stone, the cliffs tend to be pretty solid, big solid exposures of sandstone. Here, the cliffs tend to be blocky and much smaller areas of exposed sandstone. But you can see it's a good looking area. Okay, so I visited Tom's site. I recorded it. I came back. I went to Italy, and I got to Italy, and I was there about a week. And Tommy wrote me another email, and he asked me an odd question. He said, since the Blackfeet called the horse Ponokomita, which translates as elk dog, size of an elk, works like a dog, he pulls travois and does that stuff, would it be possible that they'd draw a horse with antlers? So I said, come on, man, send me a picture. I probably not, but send me a picture. You probably got a picture of an elk or something like that. But he sent me this following picture. And I about fell out of my chair in Italy because what he's got here is two horses, and each one of them is wearing a horse war bonnet. This is a Crow thing, very typical Crow thing, and it's way out of place. From this site, you can throw a baseball, literally, you can throw a baseball onto the Blackfeet Reservation. So this was out of place and very, very odd. So the next year, got back from Italy, and the next spring, early summer, I visited the Cut Bank area again, and Tommy took me to this second site he'd found, which he named Cheval Bonnet. While we were there, Tom went looking for other stuff. He went up behind that big bush there on the left, and he found a scene he hadn't previously noted when he first found the site. Here's the warrior. That yellow arrow is pointing toward a big spear point attacking that warrior. Here's what we recorded at that site. This is the Cheval Bonnet, and many of you have heard my talk at some meeting or another, and this site's published in Ethnohistory. But the point is, it's a Crow site, Crow imagery, Crow horses, Crow everything. And so in addition, we now had the horses with war bonnets up in the right. We had a Blackfoot panel. There's 3 panels at the site. That's the one down in the lower left. And then we had that big Crow fight. Well, what that did for me, I had been debating or thinking about a site type called a calling card, where a marauding war party comes into an enemy's territory, does their deed, steals a horse, kills a person, whatever, and then they record that really quickly in a rock art site as they're leaving Dodge to get back to their own territory, leaving a calling card essentially. And I've been thinking about that site type since I saw first the Turner Rock Shelter, which is a Blackfoot site down just outside of Billings, Montana. So I went to Italy again that summer. The next summer, I was contemplating this major research report about the calling card site at Cheval Bonnet and thinking, boy, I found 2 sites and I was in pretty good shape. Well, I suspect you can guess what happened to me right after that. I got another email from Tommy saying, hey, I found another site and another site. And he sent me this picture. In 2016, so that's 3 years after we first spoke, and 2 years, it's the 3rd summer I was there, I organized a group of researchers from the OIS, started out and started the Cut Bank Rock Art Survey. So there's the horses, actually 2 of them superimposed in that slide. So as part of that group, OIS mostly, but I also asked John and Mavis Greer. I asked them to participate because they'd recorded 2 sites 20 years previously, just upstream from Cheval Bonnet, literally just 50, 100 yards upstream from Cheval Bonnet. One of those is this one. This is a signature of a pagan man named White Dog. That's done in 1908. So you see they were still doing rock arty things quite late in the Cut Bank area. Mind you, Cut Bank, the town of Cut Bank sits right on the border of the Blackfeet Reservation. So Cut Bank Creek forms the reservation boundary. So we looked at GL 245, the White Dog signature. Then we went to a second site, which I'm calling the Curry Pictographs. This has art that represents 3 different traditions. This is a Columbia Plateau image here. Animals, tally marks, which are visible now in this D-stretch of that panel, and geometrics, the little sun, the little asterisky symbol right behind it, and whatnot. That's pretty typical Columbia Plateau rock art. Doesn't really belong on the plains, but the Columbia Plateau folks came clear out in the plains here to hunt buffalo, so they brought that art with them. One large panel at Curry also has some incredible ceremonial tradition imagery. Here, I'm going to de-stretch that panel, and you see 3 shield-bearing warriors. There's one, there's one here, one here, one here. There's actually a 4th one over here that just doesn't de-stretch well here. But here's a tracing now of what we did with de-stretching that picture and some others. So you've got this nice row of shield figures at the bottom, V-neck warrior at the top, and these rectangular body guys off to the right side. So lots of stuff on that panel and at that site. The Curry site has Foothills abstract tradition handprints, but the real key there is that a nearby site really showed us the extent of Foothills abstract in this area. Tommy McCormick had shown us a photograph of a site he found. This was the 4th or 5th site he found. What he thought might be bear claws, not real bear claws, but images of where an Indian had painted some bear claws on the wall. Well, we walked up to this site, and this is what we found. It's now known as Hidden Handprint Alcove, thanks to Mavis Greer and her good site naming abilities. And this is what we've got. You can see there's 5 separate panels, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to be looking primarily at this part of panel 1, which says part under ledge, and this part of panel 5, which says fallen block. So that's what we're going to be focusing on here. The hidden handprints, there you can see the bear claws, quote unquote. The hidden handprints are under a ledge right below those finger lines, right below it. And you got to lie on your back and look up at this low little overhang to see these handprints. And actually there's 7 handprints in there. You can see 4 of them here, de-stretched, of course. So this told us right away that the handprints in this part of the country are associated with the Foothills abstract tradition. And here was another bunch of handprints. Here's one here. Here's one where all you can see is the end of it because it's been broken off. And here's that fallen block over here. On the fallen block, there was a whole lot of imagery of vertical series rock art. So when you look at the fallen block, look at this part back up here. the block is fallen here, but it used to fit back in that little place there. And so that was attached to this area. Here's what a D-stretch of that area still attached to the cliff shows. And there's what the fallen block looks like when we traced it. We put it in this tracing. We're able to put it back where it belongs up here. And you see all these incredible vertical series, and they're horizontal series, but the vertical series tradition is full of horizontal series. But here's one here, here's one that bends, here's a horizontal one, here's a horizontal one, here, and this one goes clear over to here. Now, what's going on in the middle here is when that piece of rock was still in the rock shelter, it was extensively rubbed, probably by deer getting into that little alcove and rubbing their hide against it, which more or less erased a lot of the stuff. Then you had this bird guano come down across the top of it here in the middle, and yeah, there we go, in the middle and right here. Okay, so you've got this incredible panel of vertical series stuff. Well, you've got a second vertical series panel on the site, back up at panel number 2, and there's a photo tracing of that. So we got a lot of vertical series stuff and a lot of ceremonial and biographic tradition imagery superimposing the vertical series. You see it here. Here's a guy, the bottom of a guy getting speared. Here's an upside down guy. Here's an upside down guy. Here's a teepee. There's loads of ceremonial and biographic stuff here. So for the first time in this area, in the Cutbank Creek survey, we had a temporal sequence at a site that could be demonstrated both by superimpositioning, but also reinforced by pigment fading, relative fading of pigments on the same panels. And you can see what we've got down at the bottom here. We've got your vertical series with lots of overlaps. We've then got a big bunch of stuff in here, which is Foothills abstract tradition. Then a lot of spatter painting that goes on. So what they did is they took their fingers or a leafy branch or a brush and dipped it in pigment and just spattered it across the tops of these things. And they're superimposed by these spatters. And then finally, you've got these late prehistoric to historic biographic stuff with guys getting speared and people and teepees and whatnot. Not a lot of that, but just enough so we can put that in that context. Oops, there we go. So in early winter of 2016, now we'd just been there and recorded these couple of sites, and I think we had at that point 3 sites pretty well recorded. Tommy sent me an email and he said, "Kaiser, click on this film I just took and you'll be amazed." Well, he'd gotten on a private ranch up on the Kievan Rim, and this is a picture taken out of the film he shot. He shot a short little two-minute film. Damn it. Short little 2-minute film. So this is the underside of an overhang, and this is just off to the left of that overhang in another small overhang. What we've got here is 2 Blackfeet war honor scenes, and in red we've got beaver bundle imagery down here, beaver, otter, lots of sticks and whatnot. And you've read the article about this in ARARA a couple of volumes ago. But there's a close-up of the scene over here. Here's a close-up of it. And here is a drawing by Bull Plume, one of the 4 Pagan chiefs that drew a robe in 1906, I think, maybe 1909. Doesn't matter. Early first decade 1900s. And Bull Plume, what he drew, you can see it's the same structure. It's the same structure of the scene, the same kind of horse, the same kind of humans, and it's drawn in black. So what we have here at the Kievan Rim site is a very late, at least the biographic stuff, the warriors and the guys standing watching them and the guys raiding horses up at the top and whatnot. We've got a very late, possibly even post-reservation uh, pictograph drawn in charcoal at a site where they previously had drawn in red pigment this beaver bundle thing. So very, very interesting. So in 2017, we came back for a second season at Hidden Handprint. Tommy indicated at that time that he'd found horses at a site on the Blackfoot Reservation, on the Blackfeet Reservation, to the west, 25, 30 miles from where we were working at Hidden Handprint. We contacted the tribe and offered to record that site for the Tribal Historic Preservation Office. So in 2018, we got a permit from the TIPO to record the Two Medicine petroglyphs as a joint OAS Blackfeet Nation project. Our tribal cultural resource technician then was Brian Conley. You can see him in the yellow vest. He found a panel for us. He held shade so we could see it. He was very interested in the rock art. He really just ate up the idea that we had found this and we were recording this. Very interested. You see the two panels. Panel one at the top has got a pair of riders riding down an enemy. It's a special kind of coup count where you trample the enemy under the horse's front hooves. And then the second panel, panel two, at the bottom, you've got two stolen horses being recorded there. One of whom still has the picket rope from his nose to show that he was stolen as a picketed horse, which is a key Blackfoot war honor. Okay, that year when we were at Two Medicine, Carl Davis wandered off and he found another site while we were recording that first one. It was also on tribal land, so we decided to propose another project to the TIPO. We couldn't just go do it. We have to work through the Tribal Historic Preservation Office. So we left that site for the following year. We put it in abeyance. We said, Carl said, yeah, you've got a good relationship with the Tribal Historic Office. They're going to say yes to this. We'll just express to them how we can do it, et cetera, et cetera. So we set that one aside and we went to record the Samself petroglyph boulder. And this is the Samself boulder. It had been previously recorded some years before, but I could see some stuff on the photographs recorded photographically and published. I could see some stuff on the photographs that the original investigators hadn't seen. And right in the middle of it, as Troy so cogently stated, here's a bunch of guys fighting each other. So shield guys spearing one another. So I said, this is really important. It's the only petroglyph boulder we know of with that sort of art on it. So we did a rubbing of the boulder on thin muslin with charcoal, graphite, not charcoal, graphite and grass. It's a special technique they use in the Valcamonica. We did that because the bison and probably more recently cattle. It's enclosed by a fence now, but it clearly wasn't enclosed by a fence some hundreds of years, some decades ago. The bison and cattle had rubbed that rock smooth in many spots. So here we got our rubbing. That's the rubbing on it. And you can see a number of things there. Here's a face looking at you. Here's the guys fighting. We'll see this all close up in a second. So there's the guys fighting. You see two shield men right here, 1, 2, and a guy here with a big spear, and this shield guy is fending it off with a club. Very interesting. Down below here, you see all kinds of cupules and stuff. Down below here is a face. You'll see that in a minute. But I want you to focus right on this part. The reason you do rubbings of these sorts of sites, and you don't typically rub sites, obviously we all know that, but when they've already been heavily abraded by bison and cattle, they almost sand off the images. And about the only way you can see them is to make these real light on the land rubbings. And right there, right in that circle, is a hoof print. So what we've got is a hoof print that's older than that fight scene. The hoof print was on there, almost rubbed away by bison rubbing up against this stone. And then somebody came in and did this fight scene. For the stuff that's on there, there's plenty more. This is just a smattering of it. You got your fight scene up in the left there. You got two different faces down on the lower left. And on the right, you've got a shaman figure with a bison horn headdress and holding feather fans and or rattles in one or both hands. So we published that work, all the images on the site that we were able to record. Cindy Sturm, an OIS member, and I published that. It's just in the most recent era that came in your mailbox just in this last couple of weeks. Okay, so remember, back in 2018, Carl Davis had discovered this site while we were recording another one nearby. Carl wandered off. He just said, oh, it looks like some good areas up there. Why don't I go check it out? Sure, no problem. And lo and behold, he found this site. He came back with an iPhone picture of it, and he said, see, this is one you missed. Well, watch the panel on the right as I de-stretch it. That's the sort of stuff that you've got at this site. That's the amount of materials there. But other than that interesting, incredibly unique rock art, those figures are unlike anything else I'd ever seen in Montana. In addition to that, the other aspect that's so intriguing is how high out of reach that panel is perched on the cliff. Over here, you can see from here, and you're not even at the ground yet. You still got to go below the picture to get to the top of the talus slope. Here's Dave Kaiser. He's standing on a little tiny ledge that you can't see in the picture on the left, and he's 6 feet plus tall, and you can see his hat is at the bottom of this. So this panel is perched, the bottom of it is perched more or less 12 to 14 feet above where you can stand. So in 2018, Carl acted as our liaison with the Blackfeet Nation, and the TIPO said, you bet, we'd love to have you go out there and record it. You did a good job with Two Medicine, and we'd like you to go back. So they said, go out and record that, gave us permission to do so. We asked Mark Willis to help us to be a part of the crew because we wanted to use his pole-assisted aerial photography methods to record it, since there's just no way you can get up to it. And you can see the steepness in the picture down to the left. You can see the steepness of the area. It's a long ways from anywhere to go to drive. To try and carry any sort of scaffolding down there would have been, I mean, it would have taken weeks. And then even if we got it up to the site, where do you put it? How do you brace it? You couldn't have. It would have just been a disaster. So Mark's abilities with pole-assisted aerial photography were an absolute necessity. Well, due to a wet, rainy spring in 2019, that's the year we were going to go after this. Due to a wet, rainy spring, we couldn't go record the site. You can't get there in the rain, believe me, unless you've got special ATV things. And in the rain, it's not, even an ATV won't get you there very easily. So we couldn't record it in the spring. I went to Italy. We came back in September, and we said, no problem, we'll go in September. Arranged with all the people to meet us and do all this sort of thing. Well, the last weekend in September, there was a blizzard in Browning and Cut Bank last year that left 48 inches of snow on the ground. Needless to say, you're not going anywhere in 48 inches of snow. We didn't even leave Portland because we could see that blizzard moving in from Canada. But we finally got to the site. Sadly, it was during a second blizzard. Thanks to Tommy and his ATV, though, we got to the site. My favorite Indiana Jones quote at the top, but so we were rained out the first time, we were snowed out a second time, and then we were snowed out again when we got to Cut Bank on October 8th of last year. We got there October 8th, we pulled in the late afternoon, had been across the mountains looking at another site, pulled in late afternoon, drove out with Tommy. He and I drove out. We got just above the site. It didn't look like there was going to be a problem. We could have actually driven a car down to the site, probably, a truck, a four-wheel drive truck. And yet, the next morning, October the 9th, we awakened in our motel in Cut Bank to a second blizzard. We had 6 inches of snow on the ground, 3-degree temperature. and more snow in Browning. Fortunately, Carl Davis was still being the liaison between us and the tribe. He wasn't in Cutbank at that time, but he contacted the tribe. The tribe said, you know, that blizzard's blowing up. It's not going to be, we're not going to be able to get out there, but it looks like toward the end of the week, middle to the end of the week, that's going to clear up. Now there's going to be snow on the ground, but at least it'll be clear enough that you can go out there. And we had Tommy's ATV. So basically on October the 10th, it was a Wednesday, we went out to the site just to check it out with Tommy ATV'd us down there. 3-degree temperatures, cold, miserable. But we took Mark Willis down there to check and see which of his methods could we do it with pole-assisted photography, or would we have to do a drone, fly his drone around? And we went to the site and we decided pole-assisted photography would be what it would be, and we could do it the next day. So we showed up on the next day. There's Wade Running Crane, who was our tribal cultural tech with us. The Running Crane family is a pretty large and pretty important family on the Blackfeet Reservation. There's me on the right and Mark Willis on the left. Those jackets were absolutely necessary, as were the gloves. It was still very cold. But after our ATV ride with Tommy, we climbed up to the site and completed our PAP, our pole-assisted aerial photography. Now there's Mark Willis, and that's a 15-foot painter's pole he's got there. And you can mount it on top of it is his camera. I'm clicking the shutter. When Mark positions the camera and gets a position that he wants, he says, click, you know, take a picture. I do. Wade Running Crane was running the pole to put the scale and put the color checker and all that stuff in there. So, oh, and also Wade ran the pole with the flash. So during our field work at No Bear, we call this the No Bear site. During our field work at No Bear, Mark took more than 700 photographs, just like we're doing there in that picture on the left. And we all helped, Tommy and Wade and myself. A month later, by the first week in November, Willis had all those pictures, all those photographs cataloged, analyzed, looked at, and pulled together and sent to me in Portland. The photographs, if you're not familiar with the way Mark does this, it's incredible. The photographs are taken from multiple vantage points. He just puts his camera up, figures out what it's looking at, and says, take a picture, click, moves it a few feet, a few inches, a few whatever, and take another picture. He then takes all that photograph, all those photographs he got, he takes it back and he puts it through a structure from motion software and creates a 3D point cloud as a basis for a high resolution graphic of the entire site as a single image. There's the point cloud for No Bear. There's 3 panels at No Bear. I'm not going to go in extensively and talk about what's on each panel. Panels 1 and 2. The panel 1 is right here. Panel 2 is this little corner here. You see most of panel 2 has fallen off. And panel 3 is this big expanse over here. Well, I'm not going to really talk about a lot of what's on all of them, but simply to say here that he's got 123 million data points in his SFM software. And what that creates, oh, let me back up just a second. These little blue tags are what he applies not on the site, but on the photographs of the site. And that each blue tag represents a camera position that took a photograph that he used. And each of those, if you could blow it up and see it, you really can't. Each of those has a little arrow saying what the angle was. Was it taken looking up? Was it taken looking to the side? Was it taken looking at an angle over this way? Those sorts of things. So he's got all that data held together. There's the 3D model of the No Bear site with, again, panel 1, which you can just barely see right over here. Panel 2, you can see some red pigments in here, and panel 3, which has got all our great big figures on. Well, that image right there was way too large for any computer we had here in Portland to take it in and to manipulate it, to do photo tracings and whatnot. So we got Mark to chop it up into little bytes for us, A through O here, and we could take and use and process each of those bytes, and they're exact to the pixel. We could match pixel to pixel here, so we could put this thing back together using the parts. Pretty incredible technology. Here's the kind of photographs we took. That's a photograph that Mark has taken. You can see his camera shadow there at the bottom. And we photo traced from those photographs. We photo traced the images, as you can see there on the right. But our PAP photographs showed us something that, well, they clarified something we thought we had. We thought we had petroglyphs at the site, but we couldn't tell. It's too far out of reach. From down below, you can't see. From across the coulee, your photograph can't be enough detail. But if you look right over on the left, it sure looks like there's some kind of a petroglyph in there, a petroglyph of some sort of a human figure. Well, there's a photo tracing of that human figure in that petroglyph. And you can see there a tall human figure with an incredible headdress, a weapon in his hand there to the left. You can see the little circle on his upper arm, on his other arm, which we interpret as bracelets. The other dancers have the same thing. Down at his waist, just above where his legs split off, you've got a belt going around. Attached to that belt is a feather bustle going off to the right, and a bird bundle on your left. So some incredible details there, and the only way we could have ever picked them out is with Mark's PAP photography. Well, there's the 10 dancers on the site. The guy that we just looked at is this one down here, right here. And you can see there's 8 of them here and 10 and 2 more here. This one at the far right is eroded because that part of the panel is quite eroded. It was either had some plants brushing against it sometime in the past when the dirt was up to where the plants could grow right below it, or animals rubbing up against it, or possibly, less likely I think, but possibly with sandblasting. So what you've got here is this incredible suite of dancers. They're all done at the same time. We see that, and I'll show you why in a moment. And then on top of them, you have all this incredible small scratch petroglyphs. And you've got a very interesting thing, a kind of what looks like it might be some sort of a scene or composition here with a whole bunch of little marks across there. Here you've got a great big thing that looks like an animal head, maybe like a turtle or a snake or something. And here you've got this gridiron down here, and you got these big loopy things here. So some incredible stuff here with the other petroglyphs, the scratch petroglyphs. There's a photo tracing of the entirety of panel 3, and that's done from individual photos that Mark took. We made individual photo tracings. We then matched them up using the computer program to make things smaller and wider and narrower and whatnot. Put that all together and matched them up. And I'll tell you what, if you could look at it close enough, and believe me, I have, close up enough, if you come over here, that scratched line goes through that pigment exactly where it goes through. But that's hours and hours and hours of photo tracing, readjusting, getting everything correct. You see right in the middle, you see this guy, this what we call upside down man here. You can see handprint here, another handprint here, very faded, a couple of palm prints here and here. You've got some H letters. Those aren't letters, those are vertical series things. You've got this nice line of dancers here, and you've got 3 more of these guys, 1 here and 2 more there. You've got all of these anthropomorphs, and then you've got these 2 characters, which are painted in the same pigment as Upside Down Man, not in the pigment that these H's here are. So lots of stuff on panel 3. There's quite a bit of stuff on panels 1 and 2 also, but nothing like the quantities here. Okay, so excuse me. So we begin to look, what can we tell about this site? It doesn't have anything except the vertical series, and there's not much of that, and the handprints. They're like anything else in this whole area. It's nothing like it writing on stone, with the exception of the one I'm going to show you in a moment. So you've got the abraded dancers. There's no counterpart anywhere to these on the plains that I know of, that anybody I contacted knew of. The only person who made a suggestion said, look at the Guion dancers in Australia, because they're tall and linear and they do funky things and wave their arms around. But literally, there's nothing like this on the plains. Nobody has shown me anything that looks like this. The scratched imagery is also pretty unique. The gridiron, sure, everybody's got gridirons, but if you take that out, you look at that turtle head or whatever it is, you look at the little composition up there in the upper left, nothing like that. I've never seen anything like that. And believe me, I've seen hundreds of sites in this area, from writing on stone to southern Wyoming. And these two things are unique. The only strong similarities with any other sites are the H figures in vertical series, and there's actually 3 of these in a vertical series on panel 2 of the site, and upside down man. And here's upside down man at other sites. We've got 5 other examples of upside down man as a motif. And despite the fact that everybody says, oh, upside down people are dead in biographic art, that's an old wives' tale. That's urban legend. It's not true. They're very, very rare. I couldn't think right off the bat of an upside down dead person in biographic rock art. Get a few of them on robes. But here we've got these guys, and they're not dead, apparently. None of them stuck with an arrow or a spear or shot with a gun, or none of them's involved with another person fighting. Nothing that would give you any idea that these guys represent dead, head down people. Instead, what you've got on that top row to the left, you've got 2 of them in a direct conjoined overlay. The first one was that little stick figure, very simple little stick figure man. And on top of that, a second artist pecked another man right here, pecked him, and you can see the little stick figure underneath, pecked him using the stick figure as a template, but he added an ithiphallic phallus here, okay, right here. So you can clearly see that there's something going on. The second artist interacted with that first human figure upside down and added to it, animated it, let's say. Here's the second one at hidden handprint, okay? Now he's upside down. He's got a long phallus, but he's got ribs and all kinds of stuff here. And here's 2 of these figures at writing on stone. This one at DGOV2 and this one at DGOV88. And again, remember, writing on stone's only 45 miles to the north, 50 miles maybe. This one on the right, D, you'll notice that he uses a natural concretion that's been modified as his head. So what you've got here with Upside Down Man is he's clearly an important character. He's made multiple times at least 4 sites, and they do things like make him a part of the cliff here on this one. On D, he's actually uses a part of the cliff for his head. This one is at Thunderbird Cave, which is an incredible Thunderbird just up above him. And here you use the direct conjoined overlay to reanimate one of the original ones. So we don't know what he means. We have we've talked to the Blackfeet folks. We've talked to Maria Zedeno, who is the Blackfoot tribal archaeologist, the Blackfeet tribal archaeologist, and asked her, does she know of any myth or any supernatural personage that's upside down? We've looked at Whistler and Duval and Grinnell and anyone we can think of. If anybody has any ideas, send me the info. But we can't find him. But my suspicion is, since this is all very localized, that he was some sort of a personage, supernatural or mythical, who did things in that area. So here we've got a Harris diagram. Because we've got all those superimpositions that you saw on that photo tracing of the main panel 3, we've got dozens and dozens and dozens of superimpositions in here. Look carefully on this and you'll see that black lines, which are, here's the only examples here and here, black lines show Foothills Abstract superimposed on Foothills Abstract. Purple lines show the dancers, the abraded and scratched dancers, superimposed on Foothills Abstract. Green lines show the scratched petroglyphs superimposed on both dancers and Foothills Abstract. And the red line shows Upside Down Man superimposed on everything except Foothills Abstract. So clearly we've got a really solid superimposition sequence here that shows that we've got vertical series stuff, and you've got these H's down here, which are vertical series, as the first, but probably coeval or nearly coeval with the earliest Foothills Abstract stuff. Then you've got several episodes of Foothills Abstract where Foothills Abstract and then Foothills Abstract that's superimposed on Foothills Abstract and then Abstract that's superimposed, you know, so you get the idea. And then you've got these dancers, and then you've got the scratched imagery, and finally you've got Upside Down Man. You've got a little rub out here that some artist came and tried to scratch this guy out. Tried to scratch this guy out, but it's not particularly important. Yeah, it's interesting, but basically you've got these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 episodes of rock art here to give you the pretty good general chronology between vertical series, foothill, and ceremonial tradition, Foothills Abstract and ceremonial tradition. The difficulty, of course, is this is a pretty gross chronology. We wanted to refine it, so I worked with colleague Stephen Lysette, who's done a lot of stuff with me having to do with seriation studies. Ignore the principal coordinates analysis for a moment. This what you're seeing here at the right is a typical seriation. It's a character seriation using these 7 attributes of figures to seriate them. It makes a beautiful seriation. That's about as tight a seriation as you're going to get. The problem with the seriation, though, as we all know, is you can't know which end is up in a seriation. Because if you flip that thing 180 degrees, it would still make the same perfect seriation. So we can't know whether these images are earliest and this one is latest, or whether this one's earliest and these come to be latest. We simply can't tell from this seriation. Now, Stephen went a step further and he did this principal coordinates analysis. It's a special stat that he typically uses, and we've used very successfully with bison robes and Blackfeet rock art and a whole series of stuff, and crow rock art. But in a PCO analysis, you're supposed to get this great U-shaped organization. Well, guess what? Our U is perfect. It's just perfect. But again, even with a PCO analysis like this, you don't know whether this guy's the earliest and this is the latest, or this is the earliest and this is the latest. But you know that these guys are in between all of them, just like we showed on our seriation here. What to do? The issue then became, how are we going to sort this out? Well, fortunately, 7 of those, the bottom 7 on that seriation, not the round-bodied guy at the top, he's on panel 1. The other 7 are all on panel 3, and they're all just side by side. So what we could do was a pigment weathering study by using a color replacer program in Paint Shop Pro. We could tell which of those were more faded and weathered. And it's not just the color of the pigment, it's also the fact that there's less pigment on each of those images. Color of pigment could simply be different pigment sources, although they're all the same red color. But we know that, that when the pigment fades and gets a little lighter, it also goes away. And lo and behold, you've got this beautiful sequence where these guys are the most faded, equals exposed to the most erosion. These guys are in the middle, and these guys are the freshest. So suddenly, we had a way to anchor our seriation. These guys are, in fact, earliest. This guy is, in fact, latest. And you've got this development through time. You've got two things developing. Not only do you have slight change in how they drew these guys, although you can see they're all based on the same idea. These guys down at the bottom are faces in pinwheels. Then they put the faces inside the guys and used them as their bodies. And we first looked at this and we thought, well, maybe those are shields, but they just don't have any, they don't resemble anything like a shield. So they took the face and made it their spirit inside their body. Then you can see that this guy doesn't have a face, but he's got a big circle. Then they started putting these incredible headdresses on them. And then finally they came back and here's the little being inside the bigger being. So in addition to a chronology here, we can also show an evolution through time of a belief system. So that what we've got is a changing view of this essentially same supernatural being. He shares, every one of those shares something with somebody on either side of him. But they have gradually evolved in their ideas about what was the way these figures should be shown. So basically that's it. We've recorded 10 sites in the last 6 years. 7 are newly discovered thanks to Tommy McCormick. And one of the other ones, Samself, is completely recorded thanks to Tommy knowing the landowner and being able to get with her. Those 7 sites double the number of sites in that donut hole I showed you. That's it, 6 years. We've had probably in total 3 weeks worth of field work up there, and we've doubled the number of rock art sites that were previously known. And that's not the end of this up there, folks. The Kievan Rim and the Two Medicine Rim and some other places looks like prime territory for additional sites. What we've done with these 10 new sites, however, we've been able to construct a detailed chronology for the area, a chronology that's going to speak volumes for other parts of Montana and southern Alberta. We have major information regarding the temporal relationships between vertical series and foothill abstract art, and we can demonstrate a long history of people living in the Blackfeet Nation area doing foothills abstract tradition rock art. We don't think it's the Blackfeet. There's no indication that this is Blackfeet art. It appears to be the people who lived there before the Blackfeet moved in. But likewise, and again, as I just said, we see a retained belief system. You don't, if you look at the erosion of the most recent figures there, you realize that the first figures were painted over hundreds of years for that seriation to have taken place. Could well be as much as 1,000 years, during which time, it's certainly centuries, if not 1,000 years. During that time, you've got this incredible retained belief system expressed in a slow evolution of how they drew this particular supernatural being. In short, one email from an interested rancher opened up a whole new view, new chapter of Montana archaeology and rock art. I want to say thanks to the Blackfeet Nation, to Wade Running Crane, Brian Conley, John Murray, and Puggy Edwards of the TIPO office, to Tommy McCormick for finding these sites and getting a hold of me, to Carl Davis, who was our liaison and has written the 2 big reports on No Bear, Mark Willis for his pole-assisted photography. Especially I want to thank the MAS, Montana Archaeological Society, and the Oregon Archaeological Society. They're the people who funded this and allowed us to be able to get Mark to come from Texas and get all kinds of experts to come hit from hither and yon, and David Minnick and David Kaiser for photographs. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. And I think what I do now is stop the screen share.
Great. Well, thanks a lot, Jim, for your presentation. We do have some time now for questions. People can use the chat for that. I think you must have been extremely clear, because so far we haven't had a whole lot, but they're starting to come in. So please use the chat and I will share the questions. So here's a question. It says, does the pigment wear analysis take into consideration the panel exposure and possible variables in the carrier substances or mixture that could influence the stability and durability of the pigment used in a particular image?
So Peter, can I just talk and answer that?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we did the best we could there. The substrate is the same. They're all on that same panel. So we didn't go from panel to panel to panel. The substrate, as far as we can tell, is the same substrate. Certainly there's a possibility that you had some different recipe of paint that would affect that to some degree. But what we saw on the pigment wear and fading was places where the pigment, on some of those figures, places where the pigment was completely gone, obviously an erosion situation, and excuse me, places where the pigment was still good and viable, but it had faded pretty significantly. And since all of them are in the same area, we did all we could was to assume that we had that represented a temporal span.
Okay, we have another question that asked, what is photo tracing?
Well, everybody knows what a direct tracing is. You know, you put the plastic up against the panel and you stipple or draw or do whatever for the imagery. But basically, photo tracing is you take those photographs and you actually do the tracing on the photograph. You can do it by actually using stippling on the photo itself in digital photo. And Dave Kaiser does a lot of this for us. He's got a magic pen that works on a little handheld palm thing, and he actually puts stipples down and does that. I also do it with several operations in Paint Shop Pro, or can be Photoshop or any of those. But you can do a flood fill kind of thing where you fill only certain pixels that are the pigment, and you flood fill them with another color, and then you take that color off the photograph. So it's not a direct tracing, but you're tracing this image in the on the photograph itself. And what I mentioned was we had to take some considerable time to adjust those, because everybody knows there's parallax in a photograph. It's very difficult to get a photograph exactly parallel to the surface you're photographing, to get your lens exactly parallel to that. But the neat thing is that SFM program that Mark Willis uses takes that all away and gives you a final structure on which you can do that. So we would trace on the photographs, ignoring the ones that were so obviously parallaxed out that the guy, you know, looked taller at the top than he was. But we took the closest ones we could get. We photo traced them, and then we used the other photographs to give us indications about little bits we couldn't see as well on them. Then we fitted the photo tracings to Mark Willis's program, Mark Willis's 3D model, which is perfect, has no parallax at all, based on the computer program.
Thanks. I have a question. You talked about the biographic tradition as continuing into historic times. So do we have any oral accounts of creating that kind of imagery? Do we know, like, who was permitted to create that art, and how far back does that practice go?
Yes, we do. And the last biographic tradition carvings, well, the last one we know of, that we know the date, was done in 1924 by Blackfoot Chief Birdrattle, a Pagan warrior, who went to writing on stone and carved the two cars on the road, taking him up to writing on stone. We also know that there were two Crow soldiers from World War I who carved their own portraits as doughboys on the Joliet site, right, with the rest of the carvings of warriors who had fought for the previous 200 years. Biographic art on the plains gets its start in probably the 15 or 1600s. It's pre-contact, and it develops over that time and goes to 1924, which is Birdrattle's carving. There were actually doing biographic stuff in ledgers into the 1930s. Bad Heart Bull, Amos Bad Heart Bull did a long series of biographic art drawings in a ledger for in the 1930s. Now, who did that? Anybody could do the biographic art. We know that they did it in ledgers. They drew other people's deeds to commemorate other people. But we also know that most of the ledger drawings and most of the robes are a man's deeds or a man and his friend's deeds. And so we are assuming that the rock art is also a man or a man and his friend's deeds. And usually these rock art things are not robe art collection, where you get 30 or 40 images of fight scenes. Usually they're one here and one there and another one somewhere else. So we've got a really good example at Turner Rock Shelter in Montana that shows probably 7 different warriors, probably all in one war party, doing their war deeds on a panel of rock art. So anyone could do them. There wasn't a special artist class to do them, but some people were way more proficient at it than others.
So it would have started pre-horse then, would it?
Yes. The first ones we have are pre-horse. They show those full body shields and pre-metal points. So we know they're in the late 1500s. We got a site at Writing on Stone that's that. We have a site at Bear Gulch, which is probably in the first half of the 1600s. And that's just 2. I mean, there's others.
Okay, another question. Let's see here. What do the excavations, the terrain, the climatological study tell you about the seasonal use of the sites?
Nothing, sadly. We don't know the seasonality of these sites. As you can see, you can go there in the midwinter and paint or carve at them. We were there the day after a blizzard when there was 6 inches of snow on the ground and it was 3 degrees. So you can get there. We have, at Writing on Stone itself, Jack Brink did some excavation and he found some petroglyph carving tools in the excavations below some of the panels. But Birdrattle went to Writing on Stone in the summer and carved. So I don't think this art has a seasonal component.
What were they using as a tool for carving?
You can use a flint flake. Those little scratched images at No Bear were obviously done with a flake of flint or a little sharp broken piece of harder stone, but it's got to be pretty small. In the softer sandstones and for the bigger petroglyphs, none of which are at any of these sites, you can actually use sharpened bone tools, splinters of bone, make really good incising tools. And paint, you can do finger paints, you can draw with raw ochre, you can do liquid paints with brushes, you can put it on your hand and stamp it on, all that.
Were you able to take, another question was, were you able to take a charcoal paint sample for carbon-14 dating?
No, and no need to do that. And here's why. The one site is on private land. Tommy's the only person who has seen it. He's taken pictures of it, so we got all these great pictures, but I've not been able to visit that site. So at that point, we didn't, we had no opportunity to take that. But it's a picture of a horse. You don't need a carbon date to tell when that horse came there. We know the first horses came in 1730, more or less, and carbon dating just won't tell you anything you don't already know. We did do some radiocarbon dating at Bear Gulch of images of shield-bearing warriors and some other images. We got some reasonable dates, but again, all you're dating is the charcoal. That gives you a date it couldn't have been before, but you really don't know when the guy picked up a piece of charcoal and drew. That charcoal could be 500 years old that he picks up and draws today with. So we got very disillusioned about our charcoal dating in those kinds of sites.
Someone asked about the time frame for the No Bear site.
Okay, yeah, No Bear. The difficulty is we can't tie it down very well. The Foothills abstract art, the last Foothills abstract tradition art, we actually have some radiocarbon dates thanks to Karen Steelman and Marvin Rowe on the last of those at other sites in Montana, is about AD 700 to 900. So think that the Foothills abstract stuff has to be older than AD 900. How far back it goes is a question, but clearly you've got a, you've got a situation where those older paintings are hundreds of years older than that. Again, like I say, if not 1,000. So you could be going back as much as 1,000 BC for the Foothills abstract art. It could be a millennium of art from say 1,000 B, or 2 millennia from 1,000 BC to AD 900. But that presupposes that the last art at No Bear equates to the last Foothills art at No Bear equates to the last Foothills art on the Helena National Forest. So you've got this archaic phenomenon, 2 of them actually, vertical series art and Foothills abstract art. Then you've got this ceremonial art, which we think starts happening sometime around AD 500, say AD 500 to about 1500. And then Upside Down Man is clearly in that time frame, about AD 1500 to 1700. So that's your general look at that site. Basically, think from 2000 AD, 2000 BC to 1700.
Okay, another question. So we've got warriors and Upside Down Man. What about the women? Any women appearing on panels?
Yeah, women. Number one, women didn't make biographic art. They did other, well, except in very special cases. Sometimes they did art in beadwork of their husband's war honors, and sometimes they drew their husband's war honors among the Mandan, for instance, on their boat paddles. But they did other kinds of art. So biographic art is not typically done by women. Yes, there were some women warriors, and probably those women warriors were viewed as the equivalent of men for making biographic art. We've got a few women in rock art doing warlike things. So probably possibly those are done by women. We just don't know. But we don't see that the women didn't do ledger books, women didn't paint robes. So it stretches credibility to argue that if they didn't do those, yeah, but they did a lot of biographic rock art out on there. Women did all kinds of rock art. You saw the hoof print stuff on Samself Boulder, not the fight scene, but a lot of that stuff on Samself could have been done by women, or could have been done for women's purposes by shamans. You just don't know. In Foothills abstract tradition art, Those could be women making those pictures, I suppose. We just I can't think of a way to sort out how. Mavis Greer did some stuff with handprints in the Foothills abstract tradition, trying to measure the difference between a woman's handprint and a man's handprint, but I don't think she was particularly successful with that. She might want to weigh in and correct me.
We have a comment from Lorraine Gluck, who says, regarding Upside Down Man, I might be way off, but I remember seeing Navajo art years ago depicting the hero twins mythology when they went to see their father in the sky, and they were upside down. Any thoughts on that or possible connections?
Well, sure. That's yeah, Lorraine's right. Basically, although we don't think this is Navajo by any means, this is Blackfeet. This is the time the Blackfeet are in this area. But clearly, celestial beings are often shown upside down. Again, it's that change from one world to the other. But we just can't. We don't know right now. We have no information as to what supernatural being or mythical being that might be. But yeah, he could be falling from heaven, or he could be falling off the Sweetgrass Hills, or he could just be upside down for a whole nother reason. He could be Napi. We just don't know.
Okay, another question. You mentioned a panel being really high, and then also talked about animals rubbing against it. Now, I'm not sure whether that was the same panel or not, but the question is, was the soil level higher back then?
Yes, clearly it had to be, or they had giraffes rubbing up against the panel. No, clearly people had to get up there to paint and carve that stuff, and plants had to be growing there, and we do have some plant marks across panel 3. I didn't focus on them. And so basically, the talus slope used to come up to within a person's height of that major panel 3, and also panels 1 and 2. But that, as I said, those cliffs are very blocky and small blocks. And as soon as it starts to erode a little bit and the coulee down below takes out something and some dirt falls down, the blocks fall out, and pretty soon you've got that big gap between where you can stand and where the paint currently is. But yes, the talus slope ran right up to underneath those paintings originally.
Okay, we had a question about birds. You mentioned Thunderbird Cave, and someone was wondering whether those images might be condors and whether there are any other bird images at these sites.
Okay. Thunderbird Cave's at Writing on Stone. I didn't show a picture of it. Thunderbird is Thunderbird. There's some ideas that the condor was Thunderbird, but on the opposite end of the spectrum, the northern Shoshone think hummingbirds are Thunderbirds. So it doesn't have to just be a big critter. It's just Thunderbird. Those beings at No Bear have those little wings, that look kind of like this. And yeah, I suspect there's some sort of flight thing going on there, but none of them appear to be flying. I mean, they don't appear to be in any sort of flight metaphor, except the fact that they have these little stubby wings. But what to say about that? Can't tell. They could be based on bird. They're clearly therianthropic. There's parts that look animal-like, and the little wings, the little stubby wings, but there's the little pointy wings look like bird wings. The little round wings look like hummingbird wings. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think we've run out of questions for you. So I would like to say thanks again. And many people also thanked you on the chat. So thanks also to all the attendees for your interest. And if you'd like to learn more about what ARARA does, please check out our website. We have a Facebook page, and I can give you some information about our next speakers in our lecture series. So on September 12th, our speaker will be Bill Hyder, speaking on Chumash rock art. In October, Ann Stoll will take us to Zimbabwe. And in November, we'll head to the Canadian Shield with Dagmara Zawadzka. So until then, good evening and stay safe.